Hi Dad. I've had the best and most painful 2 weeks of my life, I think, possibly of my entire life. And so I want to talk about recovering from moral injury, because that's what I've been doing for a while, and it really came into focus 2 weeks ago. I've talked before on this channel about the fact that I repeated the abuse that I experienced. And I've been deeply and profoundly ashamed of that. And I there are it's always hard to tell how much detail to go into. And I'm sure that the YouTube algorithm is going to see my hands doing this, and it's going to go, that was the most dynamic moment in the video, let's use that for a thumbnail. Anyway, yeah, I don't want to go into how I concluded that I was a bad person, and how part of me was thoroughly convinced that I deserved to be killed for it, and was willing to take action in that regard. I'm sure that people can imagine easily enough that it was a distressing state to be in. Over time, people have tried to tell me that I deserve to live, and that I'm not a fundamentally evil person. And to begin with, I didn't believe them. I thought that the reason they were saying that was because they were good people, and they just didn't understand how profoundly evil I was. Over time, I started developing a sense of perspective. I compared myself to Nazis, and if the people who put I went to the concentration camp museum in Dachau, and I confronted the history of the Holocaust in a way that is impossible to do without visiting some of these sites and seeing the stories more closely. And I realized that the architects of the concentration camp system really do rate 10 out of 10 for evil, and that while I have done bad things in my life, the highest score that I felt I could try to justify would probably be a 4, and even that might well be pushing. And so that was intellectually I started to understand that I wasn't evil, and I've been accumulating good works. I don't believe that an apology, no matter how sincere it might be, is enough. I think corrective action is needed, and I've taken every opportunity that I have for corrective action. There have been some limits to that. You can't correct your abuse towards someone by forcing yourself into their life and demanding that they let you help. But the opportunities I've had available to try to make some sort of positive contribution, I have taken. Not every time. And 2 weeks ago, a few things came together at the same time, some developments in relationships, and I'm not going to tell the world about on YouTube about a about exactly what those were. Um, but I went from a point of intellectually going, yeah, okay, I can understand that there's an argument that I'm a decent human being, even though I don't feel that way, to actually feeling like I am good enough now, and that there is no longer, I no longer feel a desire to bring a case against myself, um, and for a couple of days, I was kind of high on it. I was like, oh, this is great. I don't want to hurt myself. I don't have that problem anymore. And it was liberating and kind of exhausting as well, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't allow myself to remember because it conflicted too heavily with this idea, this feeling that I deserve to die. People who deserve to die shouldn't be remembering how successful they were at one thing or another, or how happy they were about some other thing. And I started remembering those things, and that was really painful, and it was really exhausting. And I rested it to the best of my ability, and had a session with my psychiatrist, and he was very constructive, and then I discovered that I still had other problems. Glorious couple of days, sort of feeling like I'm exhausted, but I'm cured. How wonderful. And then it turns out that I still have some problems. Particularly, I now understand that there's more than one thing that was driving my desperate compulsion to help people, and some of the things in relation to my relationships with authority figures, and I know that one of the things that people have had mixed reactions about in terms of employing me is that I take a lot of responsibility. I typically take more responsibility than I was intended to take, and my tendency to take responsibility for my boss's behaviour is not always something that my bosses have appreciated. It's not always been good, frankly. There have been times where I was taking responsibility inappropriately, and trying to control things. It not only wasn't my job to try to control those things, but trying to control those things was a negative for the environment that I was in. Because of my relationship with you, Dad, right? I don't think anyone in the world got to experience you as positively as I did. Your first marriage, as I understand it, was always a disaster from the beginning. As the eldest of the second marriage, I was your only child for 5 years, and when I was 5, 6, and 7, you were great. You were just great. Not without flaws, but you were great. And my younger sisters only knew you after you got sick. And I think that helped them to have much more realistic expectations, much lower expectations. I kept wanting you to come back. I'm slightly distracted by the sirens. I don't know whether. Yeah, anyway, yeah, living near a fire station in an Australian summer is you hear sirens occasionally. Yeah, you were great, and I wanted you back, and I was raised during the self-esteem 80s, where children were encouraged to believe that if you worked hard enough, you could have anything. I just wanted my father back. And so a lot of the really painful physical symptoms that weren't actually caused by self-loathing, that were caused by other emotions that I never learned how to handle growing up. I still have those. So my planned trip to hospital is still planned. And it's been thoroughly awful to feel safe enough to feel those feelings really intensely, with the intensity of a child who, I guess, yeah, so the intended title of this is Healing from Moral Injury, right? So I have an excuse to get into the theory, I think. But I don't want to. And I'm giving myself permission to be crap. So yeah, here I am, healing from my moral injury, back on the air after a hiatus. And that'll do for now. We'll see where it goes.